Fusterhausen works with, you're active, you want to take ownership of your health, and you want to age gracefully. The problem is there is so much conflicting information out there about health and wellness, it's tough to know who to trust. Most providers are limited by what insurance will approve, so it can seem like they're only able to help you manage your health decline with more meds. On the DrKris.Life podcast, you'll learn how you can regain your confidence in your health journey. You'll learn helpful knowledge about programs, supplements, peptides, and hormones that Dr. Kris has used with thousands of patients just like you to help them crush their goals and be their best selves. So if you're ready to take charge of your health and are wanting to stay active and healthy so you can be a better parent, partner, or lover, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Dr. Kris podcast. Welcome back, Dr. Kris, to the DrKris.Life podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm good. It's a rainy day in Texas, so that's something we need.
We had a little snow here, so I'm sitting in my room. I got the heater going, and I would have a little cap on, but today we're talking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. It's like my hair started to disappear at some point. I remember one time I was taking a shower, and after the shower, I looked down and all this hair was in the tub. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, where did all that come from? And that's when I first realized that I was thinning really bad in my hair.
Yeah, hair loss or thinning of hair is one of the most common complaints that we see here at the practice. It probably only is behind fatigue or sexual dysfunction, but at least every day we're going to have a handful of customers that, and men and women, by the way, that have some sort of a hair-related question. So it's something that we've been looking into, and as my hairline starts to recede, it's just become something that we've decided to start addressing more head-on here at the practice.
Well, I have all these questions, but one of them is like, what are the common causes of hair loss, and why is it that my younger brother, he's got plenty of hair, probably more than you, mm-hmm. and why does my head look like the, that part of the playground where all the kids run? It's all just no grass grow in there.
that void of grass area. Yeah. So, many times, well, first of all, one of the myths that I like to dispel right off the bat is it's the maternal side. Your mother's side is where you get your hair genes. We get them from both sides. And, that's just simply not true. I was talking to a customer yesterday. He's like, no, nobody on my mother's side has lost their hair, but everybody on my dad's side loses their hair. And so I was like, yeah, no, it comes from both sides. It's a genetic thing we inherit on both sides of the fence. Genetics is the most common cause. And unfortunately, I guess for your brother, unfortunately for you, is we all inherit different types of genes from our parents. It's, some people don't understand that, like, you can do one of those DNA tests and find out that you and your full sibling have different DNA makeup from nationalities, right? Because you don't inherit 50-50 from your parents. So many times genetic is the most common cause, but then of course there's nutritional deficiencies, like somebody who maybe just is anorexic, or they just have such a strict diet that they're not getting proper nutrients. Like zinc and selenium are crucial for our hair growth and hair quality. So sometimes it can be as simple as that. Thyroid dysfunction can play a major role in our hair. And then just, sexual hormones, sometimes not having testosterone can cause hair loss, but then also sometimes having too much testosterone can cause hair loss. So, those are different things that we don't want to lose focus on when I talk to my patients is that, we have to make sure that all of that is corrected, because if we're trying to do hair type restoration treatments to somebody who has a vastly irregular thyroid, we're wasting our time until we correct that actual issue.
Wow. So, when I think about the treatments for hair loss, I remember there was stuff you could go buy at the store and you spray on there. It makes your hair look really greasy. I forget the name of it, but what are some of the common kind of the non-invasive ways to treat hair loss?
Well, you can get Rust-Oleum, do you
I knew a guy, serious. I knew a guy that literally spray painted his head
Do you
Black.
remember though, they used to have that infomercial and it was the guy selling the spray paint that would wash off when you showered, and so that's one way of going about it. There's actually a guy in town that still uses that. I won't call him out, but so there's things like that. Of course, also making sure that your doctor has truly looked at all of your hormones and replace things that need to be replaced, making sure. So I'm assuming all that's been done. There's of course peptides, there's amazing peptides that can help not only loss of hair, but hair thinning. We've talked about them before, but like a GHK-Cu is an amazing peptide for hair thinning. PDD-DBM is a topical peptide that can actually help regrow hair. So those are going to be on your more non-invasive sides. We now have formulated shampoos that we can help you with here at the office that help grow hair. Of course, like, our nutrients, our selenium, our zinc, our biotin, replacing those type of things help as well. So those are going to be kind of your lower, really non-invasive type procedures that people can do at home that do give patients improvement in their hair quality and regrowing hair. But then we also have now added to our practice a non-invasive FDA-approved laser that will help regenerate and improve the quality of hair. So we're really excited to unveil that. We just added it a couple of weeks ago. It's basically like a laser that you sit under. It's completely 100% painless. Takes 20 minutes, typically something that we start off twice a week. And that's really going to be for that patient that has, not full-blown hair loss, but maybe thinning, some areas that just aren't as thick as they want. So us making sure that we're picking the right patients for that procedure is very, very important. I think the only thing that's negative about the laser is if a person is bald or truly has a completely bald spot, it's not going to bring that type of hair back. And now at the practice, we basically have a extremely advanced, I guess you might call it magnifying glass, but it's something that we can actually put on the scalp and actually see the hair follicles. So sometimes you think someone doesn't have much hair. Look at the hair follicles, you can actually see that there is some hair still there. Sometimes there's not. So it's all about picking the right patient for that procedure, but that's an amazing non-invasive procedure that does require the patient to come into the office, but can give patients really good results with some of those cases of hair loss.
So what's the name of that particular one? Does it look like, at the beauty salon that you're sitting under the hair?
Yeah, sort of, it's not as bulky and big as what the ladies sit under back in the day to, I don't know, what do they perm their hair or whatever. Hell, I don't even know what they did under that thing. But it is similar to that. You basically just sit under it. It sits right above the scalp. It's Synetics International is the laser. And like I said, it's 20 minutes. Some people say they experience a little tingling of the scalp. I don't know if that's placebo effect or real, but it's certainly not a painful thing. And again, that's something that we're going to do over a 6-month period of time. We do know that really anything that we do for hair is going to take about 4 to 6 months to see results. There simply is nothing that can be done that you're going to, unless you go get a hair piece, that is going to truly change your hair overnight. And anytime I hear people saying that, I'm like, you're setting your patients up for failure. That's just not realistic.
So, all right, I've heard you say this acronym FUE.
Follicular unit extraction.
All right. And so what is it and how does that work?
Yeah, so there's obviously going to be guys out there and I'll you, and I'll tell you the difference between you and I in a second. You and I have, of course, talked about this off the camera. There's going to be guys that, like, if you look at me, I'm not going to be able to most likely regrow, these areas where truly hair is gone. Okay. The good news for a guy like me is this recession has happened over the last few years. It has appeared to stop. And most likely, if I did nothing, this is probably what my hair would look like in 20 years versus today, other than I may have grayer hair versus blonde hair. But I can feel pretty comfortable that this, because over the last few years, I've not seen any more progression, that this is it for me. This is as good or bad as it's going to get. But thinking that a laser is going to regrow that hair is probably not realistic. Okay. Might help a little bit. Maybe it's 15%, but who knows? So, if a person comes in and they want to actually replace areas that have truly lost hair, then you have to start looking at FUE versus FUT. And here at the office, we've added FUE in the form of NeoGraft. And FUE is the follicular unit extraction, basically where we go to donor sites and a machine will basically extract hair follicles that then are transplanted into the area where there is a loss of hair. Now, obviously, the issue with that is you have to be able to have enough hair follicles to transplant to put into the areas that need transplantation. Okay, so I'm lucky enough that I have most of the time it's taken from the back of the head, and I'm lucky that my hair there is quite normal. And so I have plentiful transplant potential for pulling those hairs and moving them up to the front.
So they're not going to take it from other parts of your body. It's just going to come from generally the back of your head.
Correct. Yeah. So you're gonna pull those, like I said, from the back of the head, and then move them to the front. It's actually done with a machine called NeoGraft, which is the leader of FUE across the world. But the difference from FUE and FUT, which FUT, follicular unit transplant, is generally called the strip procedure. And that's the more traditional model where they literally cut a strip of scalp out and sew the scalp back together. And I think every guy has noticed another guy that has that linear scar all the way across the back of their head, and that's going to be the FUT. Now, that's going to be more indicated for somebody who has a lot of baldness and probably doesn't have the donor site that an FUE person has. Because it's important to remember that when they go pull these follicles, they're not going to come back. So they can only pull about 10 to 15% of the follicles per area with the machine, because we don't want to create baldness in the back to fix baldness in the front. And so you have to have good transplant donor site or good donor site, excuse me. And you have to have enough of it in order to be able to pull those follicles forward. And I happen to meet both of those criteria. So that's why FUE is the preferred method, because FUE is going to have less downtime. They're both invasive procedures, but less invasive procedures, less scarring is associated with FUE. So of course, there is no such thing as a follicle transplant that is non-scarring. There just is no such thing. But if you think about it, when you do the strip procedure, there's going to be a scar. It's a linear incision. They've basically cut out a rectangle and then sewn it back together. There's going to be a linear scar. So unless you grow your hair out long in the back, you're going to see that linear scar across the back. Now, some guys are willing to have hair up front, and that's certainly a decision they have to make. But when you're going and just taking individual follicles with little bitty circular punches, typically the scarring on that is minimal. We can't say none because that's just not simply feasible, but it's typically so minimal no one notices, especially when your hair grows out just a little bit. So FUE is quicker, cheaper, less invasive, less scarring, but the disadvantage is you can't cover quite as much ground with it as you can with a follicular unit or FUT or the strip procedure.
They both sound really painful.
Yeah, so believe it or not, and again, we were joking about this, before, there's certainly things that can be done. And at our office, we're not going to be offering the strip procedure. We're offering NeoGraft only. And so basically what you're doing, though, is you can pre-medicate the patient if they're having anxiety or anything like that for the procedure. But the procedure actually is not as invasive as it seems or sounds. But you do have to locally numb the area with lidocaine. So there is a needle and a stick and a numbing to numb that area so that they can go and do it. But once it's numb, it's numb. You don't feel any of that. there is going to be about a 8 to 10 day recovery period where there obviously is going to be some soreness and tenderness. Typically, no pain meds are needed post recovery. It's more Tylenol and just, being a little bit sore in those areas that they worked on for a week or so.
So more like that sunburn you got on your head when you should have wore a hat, and you kind of notice it when you wash your hair.
Yeah. Well, as you and I were joking about earlier, I'll be able to, and we're going to document this, I'll be able to give firsthand experience because I'm having the procedure next week. So I'll be able to give firsthand experience because any of my patients that know me, if I've had the procedure, I'll give you the good and bad of it, because I think the worst thing I can do is prep you incorrectly for a procedure. I want you to know exactly what you're going to go through. So I'll be able to tell patients what it's like, in a week or so after I've recovered from the procedure. The nice thing is that you're going to have a little crusty scalp and a little bit of, scabbing, but we can actually, as long as it's the correct type of cap, we can wear a cap or something like that to kind of cover that area, just so that we're not walking around with a scabby head, but in 10 days, it's completely healed. And that's what I found to be pretty amazing, is that 10 days later, you can't tell that somebody had anything done at that point. And again, what they're doing after you extract the hair follicles, then the technician is basically isolating under a lighted magnifying glass, separating these hair follicles. Because one thing patients don't realize is when you go get an FUE, a follicular unit extraction, there can be anywhere from 1 to actual 4 hairs in that follicle. I think sometimes we think that there's a follicle and 1 hair, but there's anywhere from 1 to 4 hairs. And so they're separating these out. And then basically we go back up to the head and we numb that area now. We create little puncture sites, and we individually by hand actually transplant those hair follicles. I use the analogy, it's really no different than digging a little hole and putting a seed in it and covering it up. It's pretty much the same thing once the follicle is extracted. And then it's going to heal, and you're going to have to baby it for about 10 days, but then everything's going to be healed up and you can go about your business. And about 7 to 9 months later, that hair is going to fill in and you're going to have really amazing results. The average customer has to do that procedure 2 or 3 times. I'm lucky enough that they believe I'll be a one and done procedure, just because, again, I'm not going for, I don't care if my hair looks like I'm 18. I just want to fill in some areas. And as long as I can get about a 60, 70% improvement, I'll be happy. But the more procedures for the less hair that you have, because again, they can only pull so many follicles at a time. So, if someone's needing more coverage, that's obviously going to take more procedures.
Well, I wonder how many follicles you can pull at a time. I mean,
that's a great question. The average is usually about 2,000 follicles. And so usually the machine actually counts, like every time you do it, it counts. And so most of the time, the average, like they estimate, we estimate that my procedure will be somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 follicles. On me, they're actually going by how many they need. And I think, somewhere we believe 1,500 to 2,000 is the amount of follicles that will be needed.
So what are there risks or complications?
Well, risks, I don't think that there's risks as far as like, it's not a life-threatening procedure in any way. Obviously, to get the results, we need to follow the post-care instructions quite closely for the 10 days. The biggest probably possible complication is infection, because you are creating, if you do, let's just say we do 2,000 FUEs in a treatment, we're creating 4,000 punctures of the scalp. Okay, so 2,000 to remove and 2,000 to plant. The good news is it is quite rare to get an infection. We place, just because of the type procedure it is, it's not a sterile procedure. We prophylactically put everybody on antibiotics for 7 to 10 days after the process has occurred. So I would say probably the biggest potential complication is infection, but that's something that really should not happen as long as patients will follow the procedures as they should. So really just the biggest negative is the downtime, of 7 to 10 days, and then having to wait 3/4 of a year for your results. You kind of plant the crop and you got to wait a while for the results to really come to grow in and show itself.
So what do they predict as far as your mileage? I mean, how long will this last? Will they fall out again at some point?
Theoretically, for life. And so typically, again, once we've lost that area, we've lost that area. But once we plant new hairs in there, as long as we don't allow ourselves to have any of those deficiencies that could potentially cause hair loss, theoretically, it's kind of a one and done type scenario. Or maybe every 3 to 5 years, you come in and do a touch-up procedure where you don't go as deep as you did. In other words, you don't have to have as many FUEs, but you come in and do like some touch-ups, maybe is what the word I would use. Crazy enough, I never thought of this as I was getting certified in it. Like now, even they're doing sometimes FUEs at the time when patients are getting facelifts, as they're like moving hairlines and things because of tightening of skin, they can come in and do FUE at the same exact time to lessen the scarring and things like that. And now women are starting, the most rapidly growing population of getting FUEs actually women now, because it's absolutely indicated in women. And women are great candidates because they can hide the extractions better because they have longer hair in the back. But also even in eyebrows, now that women over the years, the fashion has kind of changed. Women used to go with really thin eyebrows. Now they're wanting thicker, more lush eyebrows. And once you've tweezed and waxed and plucked for years, they won't come back. But now they're actually doing FUE implants simply for eyebrows, believe it or not. So, women, because I think that we think of hair transplant as a male only procedure, and it's certainly still male dominated, but psychosocially, I think hair loss affects women harder than it affects men. And women many times just have true hair thinning, and they can go in and just fill in some of these areas to actually give them more thicker, more lush type hairs. So women are absolutely candidates for this procedure as well.
So there, when I asked you that question of what causes hair loss, I'm thinking of men. Obviously, I would assume women have different reasons, some similar, but some different.
Kind of the same, genetics again affect women just like genetics affect men. And a lot of times when you question these women, they'll tell you, yeah, my grandmother had really thin hair when maybe they're 50. Okay. And they're like, yeah, when mom or grandma were 65, they really had a thin head of hair. They had to wear wigs or whatever. So yeah, you can still have the same nutritional hormonal issues, obviously, but many times it's simply, again, genetics. Genetics is still the most common cause of why people are losing hair. And so, they run into the same issues, but, I just don't think women understand that they have options, just like the guys do.
So what does this cost?
So follicular unit extractions, FUEs, can vary anywhere from about $5 to up to $8 a follicle. So, you can kind of, when we treat a patient, it's hard to give them an exact number. We can give them a ballpark because it kind of is like when we start doing the procedure. One of the things I forgot to say, the difference between FUE and FUT is too, it can be a little more customized because when you're actually removing the follicles, you can actually, that's done by hand versus a big strip. So you can actually somewhat choose like maybe healthier hair follicles and things like that. Whereas I'm just cutting out a strip and this is what I have. But a procedure for actual neograft is going to range anywhere from probably minimum of about $7,000 up to anywhere $11,000, $12,000. So certainly not an inexpensive procedure by any means, but can be a real game changer for somebody who is self-conscious about their hair situation or lack thereof.
Yeah, it seems like for a lot of women, that would be an answer to, I guess, I don't know what options exist now for women when they're trying to compensate for thin hair.
Yeah, most of them are just reaching for nutritional supplements over the counter. Like there's a new one that's really popular on TV, Nutrafol. It's it's kind of like Hims for men. Now it's for men and women for hair, and they're just basically selling you supplements. And I'm not saying it's bad. Those supplements are fine. But really beyond that, there's tons of expensive shampoos that are out there that I believe they're not prescription based, but they're doing a lot of good marketing towards women and their hair loss. Other than that, I think that's where most women believe that their options start and stop. I believe that's what most people think. They don't understand that we have peptides, that we now have very affordable non-invasive laser options for these patients. And then for those patients that maybe have progressed or want more improvement that they can get with a laser and peptides, then we can actually look into FUE or NeoGraft, as we call it here in the office.
Yeah, it seem like, working with you, I guess the plan would be, I'm just guessing, but it would be like, let's take some labs. Let's make sure our hormones are right. Let's make sure our nutrition's right. Am I wrong?
Yeah. So a perfect patient would be somebody that would be willing to come in and say, hey, let's do a workup. Let's figure out what's going on with me. Let's rule some things in or out, and then let's proceed with what you think is best. What we're not going to recommend to a patient is a procedure that we don't believe is going to give them any effect, no matter what the cost is, cheap or expensive. Because that's, it doesn't matter how inexpensive or expensive something is. If it's not going to work for you, it's worthless. And that's how we look at every patient, is like, that's great that option is affordable, but it's not going to work. So, we don't need to even worry about that. You and I've joked about it, but if you came in and said, I want to do the laser, I'll be like, Steve, you could also go sit out in the rain and that's going to work just as well. It's just not for you. And that's why we have to be picky on who we choose and where we go. The good news is most of our patients are actually going to be more laser candidates. That's where the majority of people are going to go, because I do find that the majority of people that come through the door looking for help are people who are starting to have hair issues. The people who've actually kind of gotten to true hair loss, we have to educate them. They don't probably understand what options they even have. And so they're not always, as at least in my area, they're not always as they're not looking necessarily for a treatment. But then once you're like, oh, you mean I could do that and it's really that easy, then perhaps those patients would be more likely to try something like that. But again, most of our patients are going to come in and they're going to be more laser candidates, hair care product candidates, and we can and that's going to be something that's going to be more like just something that's going to be more like a few $100s a month. In long term could even be as cheap as $100 a month on a maintenance program, which, as after I talked to my wife, she spends well more than that on things that are not pharmaceutical based on her hair every month, shampoos and conditioners and things like that. It's actually quite amazing how expensive things are these days, when it comes to hair care products.
So I'm listening to you talk. Obviously, there's no options that I could ever consider on rejuvenating my bald head. Is there anything on the horizon that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. We haven't figured out how to just make hair grow back on its own. There, and there's medications, there's also, like minoxidil and things like that. The problem with like those products, as soon as you stop them, you lose all results, and they can have some nasty side effects. And so, there's, I think the biggest key is trying to educate. It's a weird analogy, but I'm going to throw it out there like erectile dysfunction. Okay. As I tell my guys with erectile dysfunction, I'd much rather you bring up this conversation when you start to have problems versus when you come in and say, I cannot get an erection. That becomes a much bigger issue to reverse, right? Because we've let the disease progress to the point to where we're at the end stage. I guess it'd be like cancer. You'd much rather treat it stage 1 than stage 4. Hair's the same way. I think the big thing that we can do as a practice is educate that, hey, let's have this conversation when it starts. It's going to be cheaper. easier and less invasive to treat you when you're starting to have hair issues versus 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years down the road when you've gone fully bald. Now, some people don't care. And if you don't care, you don't care, right? You know, I mean, that's fine. Some people do care tremendously about their hair. And so it's just having that conversation earlier. And we're just excited now that we can really start having new options for our customers.
So is there like a general age group of women and men where this starts to be apparent?
Well, we're seeing it younger and younger, but the one thing I probably would hesitate is if I had somebody that came in that was like, let's say 22, 23 years old with a receding hairline, is that I would probably encourage that patient and I know I would encourage that patient to go more non-invasive because the hair loss is going to continue. And maybe we could halt it. Because let's think about this. Let's say I've just got a little receding hairline. I'm 23 years old and I go and we put hair back here, but then hair behind it continues to die. Mm-hmm. Well, now we come up with a weird look, right? Now we've got some healthy hair up front with nothing, the dead zone behind it. And so what you don't want to do is treat those patients too early with like FUE, okay? And so those would be patients that I would say, hey, let's jump on this with more non-invasive things. Let's try to slow this law. Let's try to figure out if there's something non-genetic going on. Let's try to truly do the full court press on saving what you got. And let's just kind of follow this over a few years and see where we're at.
All right. So I've been listening. I want to investigate this best way to go about it, Dr. Kris.
Well, the easiest way is just call us. Either, we're adding the hair section to our website, as you well know, because you're the one helping with that, of course, or leading the charge. But so that'll be coming soon. But you can just click on the consultation link on our page if you want to go that route and just tell us what you're wanting to come in for. Lauren, my assistant, will reach out to you and schedule an appointment, or you're welcome to just call 817-599-9902. Either way is the easiest path. At the moment, we're offering free consultations for hair, so you're not obligated for anything until you decide to do something with us.
Awesome. And you can also visit theresearchclinic.com. That's theresearchclinic.com to schedule an appointment as well. Okay, so you're going to get this done yourself. So we're going to get a follow-up conversation and we're going to discuss it. I think it's smart. I think it's excellent that you go through the procedure yourself and that you can give a more, you can talk about your experience actually.
Yeah. And as you and I talked about, my loss of hair has not been something that I've been hung up on. It's not something that I'm happy about. I mean, like, none of us are happy about these age-related changes, right? I looked the other day and I was noticing my skin is getting thinner. I always remember my dad's skin. I always look back and my dad was a mechanic and I always remember how he had bruises everywhere all the time. And I always remember he would a wrench would slip and he'd bleed. And I noticed the other day, I was like, dang, my skin is thinning like my dad, at 50. So am I happy about that? Hell no, I'm not happy about it. Am I happy that my hair receded? No. Is it something that has affected my psyche? No. But it's something that I'm happy to fix if I can. And so at first I was going to, use a patient as the example, but then I decided, I think that me being the patient is probably the more important thing. I need my customers to be able to know that A, I trust the procedure enough to do it myself. B, here's the results. I'll be able to, well, not right now, that's not the results, but I'll be able to show them the results, which is a great marketing ability to do for my patients, and then give them just real world explanation of what I went through and how I felt and the recovery. So I went ahead and decided to do it. The timing's not good for me. I've got all kinds of things coming up. I'm like, but I'll just wear a cap, and people will be wondering why I'm wearing a cap, but I'll do it anyway. So on one hand, I'm excited to see how it goes. We're going to film it. We're going to, as you know, we're going to try to clip it up and just do a little video that people who really are interested can see. Not a video off a website that the machine puts out, the company that manufactures the machine, but really, they can see me going through the procedure. We can get all of those videos from the companies, but I just always feel like it's better if they can see, oh, that's actually Dr. Wisserhausen having the procedure himself. And then, of course, we're going to do a lot of social media follow-ups, hopefully like maybe weekly, even if there's not a lot of changes, but to show the progression over 9 months and what happens. So we're excited to get that going and to have you guys help us do that. But of course, yeah, we're going to do a post podcast to kind of a wrap up of what we went through.
All right. Well, another excellent conversation on the DrKris.Life podcast. Dr. Kris, any last words?
No, just hope everybody's having a great week, and look forward to talking to them next time.
All right. And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining the Dr. Kris podcast. If you learned something today and you want to connect and get more information, visit our website, www.DrKris.Life, where you can find more great information or even schedule a time to learn how you can engage with Dr. Kris. Be sure to follow, like, share, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Dr. Kris podcast.